Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Monday, June 23rd. I didn't quite get this video edited yesterday. I was recovering from my physical glitch out the night before. And I was going to include talking about the NBA Finals, which I will do on the Apocalypse Now channel. Because, I used to talk about sports more there. But I'll do that in the other channel. So I want to make this exclusively about this, whatever's happening with the war with Trump and other things. But I'll probably do that later today. But anyways, here is this video. Greetings, brothers and sisters. So there's a phenomenon. I haven't heard anybody else talk about this. I'm sure people have in different ways, but probably not specifically like this way. There's a phenomenon where you know more about other people than you know about yourself, or you can see more in other people, and there's parts of yourself that you don't want to see. An example of this is, today's Sunday, June 22nd. So Trump just bombed Iran, and he said a bunch of stupid stuff, a bunch of BS stuff, and he talks about Iran being a bully. And I'm not disputing whether Iran is a bully. Like, their government certainly bullies their people, and they would bully lesser governments and the rest of it. But in this case, America and Israel are the bullies. But Trump is one of the biggest bullies ever. He's bullied people in business, his personal life, like it's one of his hallmark qualities. He's a bully. And yet he's condemning these bullies. He said this a few times. He's called these countries bullies. During the brief statement, first his tweet about this, and then his statement about how only America has these military capabilities, right? That a bully is somebody with great power that imposes and forces their will on somebody else, which is Trump's MO. Like, he likes, he's trying to bully people with his tariffs, and he bullied his vendors as a person. He's a guy that just he emits bully energy, right? He's just the epitome of that, and yet he can't see that in himself, right? And it's like Joe Biden talking about how other people are senile, and Trump is, when Trump and Joe Biden were talking about each other's golf swing, which I talked about how that was, just showing the end of America as we now know it, when you got these old politicians, narcissistic, low character politicians, arguing about who has a better golf swing. And so, you see this in your own life and the lives of other people. It's harder to see in your own life, where people see things in you, both good and bad, that you don't see yourself. And when somebody points these things out, it makes you uncomfortable. It's something that you've constructed some sort of illusion. And maybe, you were told you were a piece of shit by your parents and other people. And that's your worldview, and that's what you're comfortable with, right? There's a scene from that, that really horrible show, 2.5 Men, where the character that isn't Charlie Sheen gets a prostitute, and she's talking to him like he's great. And he's like, that's not very believable, because he's mediocre as a, whatever, as a male specimen, as a, and so she starts saying things that are more believable, right? Because that's what he believes about himself, right? So, you have a situation where sometimes you receive a compliment from somebody and it makes you feel uncomfortable, because even if it's true, sometimes somebody's just, buttering you up to get something from you. But somebody gives you a genuine compliment about something that you don't acknowledge about yourself, and you feel uncomfortable. You feel like it makes you feel uneasy, because it's not something that's a part of your reality, right? And then, of course, when people say things to you that you're not aware of your faults, and you get feedback, and your way of dealing with that feedback, right? The way of The way that you can absorb feedback coming back about your flaws. It's, both are difficult. There's people that you really care about and people that you love, and you'll distort your view of those people that you love or you hate. Somebody that you hate does something wonderful or exhibits good qualities, and you'll find a way to shit on it, right? Because that's it doesn't match the view of those people. Like people who hate Trump or hate Biden or hate Democrats or hate liberals can't say anything good about them. There was a debate, the debate between Hillary Clinton and Trump, where one of the reporters asked them both to say something nice about the other person because it was getting so ugly. And Trump was able to say she was tough. Like Trump was actually able to give her a compliment saying she was tough. She couldn't say anything nice about Trump, right? She just couldn't find one thing, right? And everyone has something that you could compliment. Everybody has some kind of abilities. They have something that you could see. But if you are blinded by hate, like everybody who hates Trump, everyone who hates Biden, you can't possibly see those things, right? Because you have a delusional view, and your emotions are blocking that perspective. And so people that you're not as emotionally invested in, you can look at them and you can see things, right? If you're not wrapped up in your own if you're thinking about things in terms of yourself, like Trump always bringing stuff back to himself, like narcissists, they can't see people, but Trump is able to look at someone like Hillary Clinton and say she's tough or something like that, right? But also, he thinks of himself as that way, like so. Things that are within that you see about yourself, you can see in other people. But if you remove yourself from your assessment of other people, if you're doing it like as a professional or as somebody who's, just there for somebody else, as you're just observing without having, thoughts about, anything to do with yourself, and you don't have any prejudice against them, it's easy to see things that they can't see, and people who are intertwined with them can't see. Sometimes an outsider can come in. If you start a new job, oftentimes you'll see more of the dynamics and more of the fucked up things of the place. And within a week, you're sucked into the drama and you're a part of it. But initially, like if you go into like this idea of Stockholm Syndrome, you're inside everything becomes cultish and you become a part of it. But when you're an outsider in the beginning, you can observe all kinds of things. And if you give them feedback, they immediately turn on you and they, dismiss your reality, right? And, oftentimes when people get feedback, it makes them glitch out and flip out and they can't deal with what they're being told, good or bad, and more often bad, because very seldom people see the good in other people that they themselves don't see, because people aren't looking for that. So you probably might have heard all this stuff before or thought about yourself, and these things aren't, this isn't rocket science. But people are able to observe in you what you can't see in yourself. And when you're presented with that information, most times you find some way of not absorbing it and dismissing it or ignoring it or whatever it is, some defense mechanism. But a spiritual person, when you become a spiritual person, you should have no surprises. Because as a spiritual person, without narcissism, you have to embrace your divinity. Not in some self-talk, I'm divine or I'm great or whatever. But you have divinity within them. I've said this many times in my videos, that people have a hard time seeing and dealing with their dark side, with the negative part of themselves. The demon or the potential demon within them, an ego run amok. But they have an even harder time and are more scared of the saint within, of the potential angel or saint that's inside of them. The saint, the self, the self with a capital S, that they're hopefully destined to become, right? The best version of yourself. People are scared of that for lots of reasons. Embracing the divinity. And their ego doesn't want to give into it. So a person who's on a spiritual path has to embrace the divinity within them and see that they have a higher nature. And accept it, no matter how bad their self-esteem is, how much they've been told they're a piece of shit, and that's how they view themselves, how much they embrace the negative, self-deprecating stuff. You have to be able to see that you have the potential to become a saint and you have divinity within you, and you have a higher nature. You know, even the greatest saint embraces their lower nature, shows signs of, you know, like the demon within, has these moments. And even the worst people, the worst criminals, have moments where they have empathy, or they have love, or they have higher consciousness. Like everybody has both things in them. A spiritual person has to accept their potential. You know, this idea of being born a sinner in the Christian tradition is so bad. Like, because yes, you have the ability to sin, but you also have the ability to do godly work and be a saint. You have both things. And so first you have to accept that you have divinity within you. You have to see that there's divinity within you. And the second piece is you have to accept that there's things that you do to block that divinity, that hamper your spiritual evolution. You have tendencies, lower tendencies, that pull you down and sabotage this, you becoming the best version of yourself. And you have to accept both those things, that you have both in that you. You have to see them for what they are. Like when you are in your lower tendencies, right? You're in your demon stage. You have a lot of victim consciousness and a lot of poor me and a lot of, and this is why I get to do this. And this world's against me. That's, that's the self-talk. That's the stuff that you have inside of you that you have to say, that isn't true. Everything comes from God. Everything I'm getting from the world is reflecting back to me what I am. And that, I have these tendencies and I've created them for whatever reason. And it isn't because I'm a victim, or maybe you were a victim in some way, or maybe bad things happened to you, so you found a way to make up for it. But they happen for a reason. There's some reason for this. There's some scaric reason. The idea of samscaras, which I've talked about so much, impressions that are from previous existences or from this existence and this life, that have created your future, right? Your past has created your future. And so there's a reason for everything that's happening, that there is some sort of plan, like people who believe in God believe that there's a plan, and the plan has brought you these things that are undesirable, to reflect back to you something that you need to absorb and accept. And so victim consciousness and poor me stuff just blocks that. And so you just have to accept the things that are there, and that you realize you might have needed them for one reason or another, but you need to let them go so you can evolve. That they're blocking your growth as a spiritual person. And then embrace your higher nature, even if it means you're somewhat vulnerable to the world. You're opening your heart, you're being positive, and you're getting rid of your cynicism. And when you do that, you're a target in the world of darkness and egos and everyone else's demons and all these things. And you have to accept the vulnerability and the pain that you feel, because when you embrace your higher nature, you feel pain all the time. Because you look around and you see what's happening in the world, you're going to feel pain. And so these are the things you have to accept. And when you accept these things, then when people reflect them back to you, the higher or the lower, you can accept those things. You're not you're not freaked out by it. It's not destabilizing in any way, because you see the things within you. You see yourself in ways that other people so easily see you. They can easily see it, but you can't, because of all these ways that you've constructed narratives about yourself that are, put in there by other people, or, your own construct, or, past existences, or whatever it might be. And so you start seeing reality. Like, this is the idea of seeing reality, where you're not trying to, you're not doing things to warp reality and have a specific lens in which you see the world. You see the world for what it is. And then you're a true truth seeker. You're not manipulate reality to suit your worldview, to make you feel good about yourself, to adjusting the facts to fit your feelings, right? This is a saying in the therapeutic world, in the world of psychology. And this is also a spiritual principle, distorting reality to satisfy your interpersonal view of reality and yourself and everybody around you, right? Changing what you see because you have prejudice. You're prejudging things in a way that you're constructing a narrative that fits your inner world. And so you have to go work on your inner world. You have to purify your inner world. I mean, the Sajmark system of cleaning and meditation this is what it ends up doing for you. Like over years of wearing away at the things that are not your divine nature, that are constructs of your ego, and then embracing the divinity within you, connecting to the divinity within you, and feeling that presence and, in its purest state. And so when people are able to do that, they become spiritual people, right? Because they're no longer looking for ways to change reality. Like you're accepting reality as it is. You're accepting God as God is, right? You're accepting divinity for divinity's self, not for some way to aggrandize your own accomplishments or to minimize your own accomplishments because you feel like you're a piece of shit. That's where, people who are dishonestly humble or narcissistic and, braggadocious and make themselves into something that they're not. It's a distortion of the divinity that exists within everybody and everything, right? There's a perversion of reality. People think about it with people who have big egos and have narcissism, but don't realize the people who are falsely humble are denying their divinity, right? Where the people who are embellishing their accomplishments, somebody like Trump, and they're bragging and telling you how great they are all the time, that's, false. I mean, it's as great as you can become as a person, as great as you might, all your accomplishments as a human being in the material world, it still is less than anything you do as a spiritual person. The third master of the Sajmark system, Master Charji, said that the highest part of the lower is still lower than the lowest part of the higher. And so the greatest person in the world in terms of materiality is still lower than, in terms of their path, not lower in a, I'm better than you type of way, but lower in terms of their, their spiritual evolution, their evolution as a soul interacting in the material universe. Their person who is materialistically successful is still not on the level of a person who's just beginning their spiritual journey, right? And so there's somebody who's a well-accomplished person and brags about it and feels great about themselves and pats themselves on the back, but they haven't yet connected to their spiritual path and the divinity within them. Whereas a person who is self-deprecating and appears to be humble, and you feel better about that person, but they're also lying to themselves in a negative way and refusing to embrace the best part of themselves. They're constantly dwelling on their negatives and their flaws, and and then there's some sort of feeling sorry for themselves and some wowsy woo-woo kind of stuff, right? Where it's just all negativity. Where somebody who is on the spiritual path embraces their higher nature while seeing that they need work to improve themselves and to get rid of the things that are constructs of something that is no longer necessary and certainly not helping them on their spiritual journey. All right, so like I said, today is the day after the Trump, bombing of Iran, and so I want to cover some other things here. I'll probably get back to that. I just finished a video this morning that went up today. So Sunday, June 22nd. This will go up on Monday, and so let's get into some of the other stuff here. Okay, I was going to lead with the Jasmine Crockett thing. It goes with the beginning of the video. But these things came up. I don't know how much I'm going to cover the war because I've already made a video that I put out today, and I did about 20 minutes of half-hour content on that. So, which I released today on Sunday. Tomorrow this will be up on Monday. And maybe I'll get back into it, the stuff with Iran. There's not really much more to say about it unless there is. Like right now it's just everybody reacting, which I'll get into in a moment here. But here's this guy, Pete Hegseth. This is a real piece of shit, this guy.
For the entirety of his time in office, President Trump has consistently stated for over 10 years that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon.
You know who else says that? You know who's been saying it for 40 years? Bibi and Israel. And so he's just parroting what they say. Like, he knew Israel was his... Everybody has to have handlers. Everyone has to have a group of powerful people with money and influence because Israel has as much or more influence than any foreign government on American politicians, right? They buy all these politicians and they make them sign an oath that they'll, as political leaders, they will support Israel's ability to defend itself. And we know from Cynthia McKinney, one of the kind of real politicians out there, who refused to sign that oath because it's not a part of her. This is a foreign country, and they took her seat. They dumped $1 million into her opponent's campaign. She was a representative from Georgia, and the people who don't sign this oath, they end up not making it into politics. And we'll get into this with Schiff in a moment, right? But Israel's rhetoric is always echoed by our politicians. And Trump, one of his handlers was Israel, also Wall Street, and the big banks. They all like Trump, right? They all push Trump. And so everyone has to have their power brokers behind them. And so Trump knows this with Israel. Netanyahu said there's been no better friend in the White House than Trump. So, of course, he's going to say that same bullshit. It's a fucking, it's disingenuous to say that this is, this is really bad, right?
Full stop. Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated.
This guy's hair, he's such a greasy motherfucker, but the most thing is a poser, right? He was in the National Guard, which I'm not shitting on the National Guard, but it's a much bigger deal to serve in, the other military branches in terms of basic training, in terms of the indoctrination they put you through, and in terms of what you're going to do in warfare. Now, he did something in terms of the National Guard supporting troops. I don't know what that was, but he's a poser, right? He's not a real one. And he's, his stuff with his treatment of women and his alcoholism, and really what he was good at was being a Fox News commentator. But he wasn't good enough to keep his job when he showed up drunk or breathing out alcohol from the night before and banging his producer while he was his wife was he was married to his wife and then going out and sleeping with another woman who claimed it was a sexual assault in a hotel. And then his mom writing a letter about what a piece of shit he is, right? And he's a makeup, fucking J.C. Penney model version of a guy who pretends to be a military guy, right? He's a fake, he's a poser.
Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could.
They all dreamed of it. They wish they had the fucking cojones that Trump has. Trump got worked by Israel, bro. He wasn't planning to do this. This was not something that, he was talking about doing. Did he ever once campaign on this? No. Did he ever once say that he would like to blow up Iran's nuclear facilities? No. He was working on a negotiation that hadn't fallen apart yet. The negotiations weren't over, and Israel didn't want a deal. They looked at this as their opportunity, so they rushed themselves and then, through owning of politicians, America into something that we weren't ready for. And you're pretending that this was Trump's vision. Trump got worked on his birthday. They got punked by Netanyahu. He still had to go with them because that's, what Trump does. And the guy realized, it was now or never, like all the stuff that Israel's going for now. And then Trump, they were like, you got to do this one thing for us. And Trump's like, well, okay, I'll do it. Fucking, you make it sound like he was some kind of a mastermind, right?
But until President Trump.
Boom. It was so puppeted by Israel that he went through with it.
The operation President Trump planned was bold, and it was brilliant.
Okay, so he's a military strategist. He probably didn't know any of the fucking things that were even being used until they told him about it. He didn't know what to do. It's not his fucking plans, right? It's like taking some random person who knows very little about football and asking them to design an offense. It's silly, right? It wasn't his plan.
Showing the world that American deterrence is back.
Yeah, America's stupidity.
When this president speaks, the world should listen. And the U.S. military, we can back it up. The most powerful military the world has ever known. No other country on planet Earth could have conducted the operation that the chairman is going to outline this morning. Not
Boom. No, none of them. Well, where the kick-ass ones.
even close.
Not even close. That's what Trump said. Not even close. Not even close. They're not even close to us, right?
Just like Soleimani found out in the first term. Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program, that nuclear capability will not exist. He meant it.
He meant it. He says things all the time, and sometimes he means it, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he doesn't even remember what he said. Sometimes he said one thing, sometimes he says the opposite. But when he actually does it, then he means it.
This is not the previous administration.
Yeah, no, it's not.
The President Trump said no nukes. He seeks peace, and Iran should take that path. For the entire
Yeah, peace through fucking dropping bombs on motherfuckers is not peace. And so fuck you and you're fucking here. So one more thing here, unless I see something, I'm not seeking it out. I haven't checked my messages, and people might send me links. And, you know, if some YouTube recommends something that you know, I'll probably wait till tomorrow to cover it. But this is the last thing I want to talk about here in terms of the war. So this dude had Schiff on.
Is California Democratic Senator Adam Schiff.
Look at this motherfucker. Look at this fucking guy right here. Look. Holy shit. You see these people, you're like, how the fuck are they, how are they, you know, how does people vote for these people, right? In California, this guy wins unopposed, but still, someone had to pick him, right?
Senator, so glad to have you on the program. Obviously, the president authorized these strikes again against Iran last night. He says that they have been successful. Do you see any upside, any positive news for the security of the world in learning of the success of these strikes?
First of all, Casey, I want to express my gratitude that the pilots are all out safely and acknowledge the skill, the bravery, and the...
Oh, my God. Fuck you. You know, for one, he's owned by Israel, too. So he's signed the pledge. So there's certain things he can and can't say about this. He can shit on Trump's participation, but he can't undermine the military and talk shit about the military. You know, it's dropping fucking bombs. Usually kids are involved, right? I mean, when Joe Biden droned those kids in Afghanistan, claiming there was some bullshit thing called ISIS-K, remember that's fucking nonsense, right? And so one of the things I wanted to say in the video this morning about my connection to Iran is, you know, where I used to go to meditation in India, Chennai, India, where the headquarters used to be. Now they're in Hyderabad. The people from all over the world that did the meditation were there. Like I met people from, you know, the island of Madagascar in Africa, and people from, you know, countries I've never even heard before. And some of the best people and the people that I got along with the best were Iranians, right? I just really like the Iranian people. There's a few people particularly, you know, there's people I just, you know, would resonate with. I'm a very, you know, I don't make friends and, you know, whatever, but I, you know, talk to people all over the world. And some of them I would get closer to than others. And the Iranian people, and there was probably at different times 20 or 30 of them that came there. And they, you know, in their country, they're not allowed to meditate. You have to do it secretly. I mean, it's just a whole thing. And, you know, I've talked about this. They, you know, I knew that my country had fucked their country over. And they could easily hate Americans, and they didn't. They were, you know, they were very friendly. You know, they were very positive people. And, you know, the Iranian people had been very moderate before America did Operation Ajax. You know, I talked about that earlier in my video today on the other channel. But, you know, I have some connection to the country because of that, because I know people that are there. I know some of their struggles. And, you know, I really felt it emotionally when we invaded Libya and how fucked up that was, some bullshit war, which I talked about that in my last video as well. And, you know, we've made them into a monster. Whatever their bullshit religious theocracy is there, the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who, all these fucking guys there, and the darkness that exists in that country now exists because we took down a moderate leader, and you can't erase that from your country's history. I mean, I'm not connected to these people, these governmental fucks, and I've always been an outsider, but I'm a part of America, and we all work together to create what America is. And we all have some ownership in fucking that country over, even though I wasn't born when it happened. And, what happened afterwards, of course, with the Shah of Iran and then the other stuff, I was there for that stuff. But we took down a moderate leader in a progressive, moderate country, one of the most progressive countries in the Middle East, and should have been an ally. And should have been an ally in terms of, they could have worked with the various countries, Israel and these other countries, as a democratically elected president, and a country rich with resources that could have been, could have had a valuable relationship, because British Petroleum didn't want to split the profits with the people there, the country. They destroyed this country and then put in a puppet, and whenever that happens, you fuck that country forever, or for hundreds of years. And then, and it ends up coming back to you. And so pretending Iran is a monster on its own, like somehow they got there by a choice of the people, it was outside interference that caused by America, and I'm sure Israel played some part of this, and certainly Great Britain. And then you have to say, all right, we fucked that country up. And if you do that, then you can't just demonize these people and say, oh, they don't get to have a nuclear weapon or whatever. You have to come with a sense of, we need to fix this. Like, it's up to us to fix this. And so that lack of personal responsibility I was talking about in the beginning of the video, and claiming to be the heroes, and even though we're the only ones who have dropped a nuclear bomb, and Iran hasn't shown that they're trying to build a nuclear bomb, at least they're not completing it, and making it like they're somehow worse than the rest of us, is completely fucked, right? And so, because these guys won't say that, the news, this dude here, and this guy here, this manly man here, there's nothing they can do and say, because they won't tell the truth, right? And so, as long as the truth is for them is that Israel needs to be protected at all costs, and when we're more about Israel than we are about ourselves, we care more about Israel than ourselves. Israel has things that we don't even have, that we've given to them or paid for, that Israel has a lockhold on the American government, and that we have fucked countries up, and now are seeing that there's effects for that. There has to be something like karma. I talk about Samscaras quite a bit, which is different than karma, but there has to be some way of accountability in a divine system. If there's God, then there's accountability. If there's God, then there's a plan and there's consciousness. And if you have a soul, then you have to be accountable for your mistakes. And any mistake you make in this life, you're going to have to carry over to a next life. That's just basic spiritual logic, right? And so to think that America, just because Iran can't hurt us in any real way right now, that America is going to get away with this bullshit forever, has never panned out. There's been great empires that have the number one military that end up, where are they today, right? And look at where their countries are. You can go across Greece and Rome and the Mongols and and Chinese and these empires and that were once great empires with emperors and great political movements, and they're all gone now. And there are ruins all over the world, and pyramids and things like this, right? Epic buildings that used to be around civilizations that no longer exist, right? And so, our day is coming. Like, and this is a huge indication of the kind of people they're out there in front giving you the information, right?
Professionalism of all the military forces that were engaged in this military operation. But it's not an operation that should have ever been authorized by the president in the absence of intelligence showing that Iran had made the decision to break out and build a bomb. The intelligence I've seen, and it's been limited, indicates that Iran had certainly enriched uranium but had not made the decision to build a bomb or pursue the...
Are you calling Israel a liar? Are you calling Netanyahu a liar? And so they have nothing. Let me show you one other thing here. So AOC said this: the president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers. He has impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations. It's absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. So you can see with both Schiff and the news media, they'll bitch about this thing for whatever period of time. And they'll talk about how Trump did it wrong. And it's just all fucking impotent, lip dink, not real stuff. It's just words. Because they have nothing, right? If there was enough, if the Democrats get a majority in 2 years in the House and maybe the Senate, then they might get Trump impeached. And I don't even know what that'll mean, right? And I don't know if Trump would even step down. But until then, this is just bullshit rhetoric, right? Where she can claim that she said these things and stood up to Trump when she has a failed attempt at running for president, because no one's going to elect the Democrats will never nominate a socialist liberal, because that'll be the death knell of their candidacy. And so this is just like all this stuff that comes out there. Trump does something, and the correction, the divine correction, isn't going to come from America. It isn't going to come from the Democrats, who have nothing, who have used Trump as their political center for the last 10 years. They talk about Trump more than Trump talks about Trump, right? And that's hard to do. And so the media and the Democrats are 100% all in on Trump. And what would they talk about if they didn't have Trump? Like, if Trump just died tomorrow, what would they talk about? Like, there'd be that. There'd be like, okay, he's dead. And then J.D. Vance would come in. He's not nearly as they would talk about him, but not like the Trump or whatever it was. And there'd be nothing for them, right? They'd have no platform. The Democrats, whatever stuff that J.D. Vance, he'd be more mild than Trump, I would assume. And so, it would be over for them. They love Trump. As I said this for years, they love Trump. Trump is the center of their universe, right? Their Democratic platform is Trump, 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 Trump. And so when Trump does disappear in 4 years or whatever it is, and if he doesn't try to find a way to run for a third term, of course he's getting older, and I assume America will be in such bad shape that he'll be cowering, and he'll make a quick exit and disappear. There might be some legal things that follow him after the presidency, but who knows, after the Supreme Court ruling. But there's nothing. They have nothing for him because they don't want to get rid of him. And the powers that be, he's their biggest asset. And I said this when they were so-called persecuting him in the 4 years that Joe Biden was president. I'm like, when he's in jail, come call me. When I see him behind bars and he can't run for president again, otherwise he's going to be president in 4 years or whatever it was in 2024. Like I said that over and over again, because there's no way they're getting rid of this guy. He is gold. He's gold for the so-called controllers, and he's gold for the Democrats, and he's also gold for the Republicans. He's one of those guys who can have people hate him so much but also love him so much and do all kinds of shit that ends up being a distraction. And, he's a great shield for the people that really control the system. And he does their bidding, which is to bring America down in a system that no longer is solvent, an economy that can no longer be supported, and to take Americans into a new phase of existence that most Americans don't want any part of. And so, there's nothing here, right? Okay, one last clip I forgot about here.
This is major breaking news. The United States now at war with Iran.
So I've been covering how there's people who go to Don Lemons for their news. I mean, Don Lemons is their source for telling them what's going on in the world. There's plenty of people on the internet that go to various people, right? There's many people on the internet who are, are go-tos for people to come in and to listen to, right? That people go to when they want to hear an explanation about what's going on. I'm one of those people, right? And so Don Lemons is also one of those people. And he's the dopiest guy in media, just remedial takes and just clueless. He's the most clueless guy. Look at him. Look at his fucking eyes. I think he's alcoholic and possibly a drug addict, and I mean, he just a mess.
The President of the United States, Donald Trump, releasing a statement just moments ago saying, "We have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran." He included the name of those sites. He said all planes are now outside of Iran airspace. And then he says a payload of bombs was dropped on primary site Fordow. All planes are safely on their way. Congratulations to our great American warriors, he says. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The president posting this just moments ago on social media.
And so he's got to get up there because he has to be a voice for people so that they can understand what's going on in the world.
The United States has now been drawn into a regional fight with Iran and Israel. Details still to come. This is breaking. Also, check back with the Don Lemon Show on YouTube and on other socials, including Substack, for live breaking news updates.
So you're going to him, right? This is this guy. So, I mean, just wonderful. Like, this shows you all the idiocracy things you need to know about. That this guy is somebody that people think as a legitimate source, like a source of information. Okay, so there's a couple more voiceover things I want to do here. The first one has to do with this thing came up like autoplay yesterday. And, I watched something by Katie Couric. She interviewed somebody, and they're really recommending the shit out of her. She's got a podcast now like everybody else who can't, there's podcasters and there's people who used to be on TV like Don Lemons who need to have something. But anyways, it was the title of this video that got to me. It's an hour and 7 minutes interview with Jasmine Crockett, who is the woman who said big, beautiful, or fake, beautiful, fake, not beautiful, fake, blonde, beach blonde, fake, muscle, butch body thing. I butchered that, but you remember it. To Marjorie Taylor Greene. And then they celebrated her saying that like it was some kind of wonderful thing she said. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene said something about her eyelashes, and then she came back with that, that comeback. And so she kind of popped onto the national scene because of that stupid exchange, right? And she talks about being really smart and education. Her mom was like great at being a student, and how she excelled as a student. Like, starts off like that. So I had to search for this part where it was the title of the video, which is right here.
And that at the same time that you're pretending as if all the crime in our country is caused by immigrants that have come over, and somehow you're having to go to their jobs to grab them up and round them up and throw them who knows where, but they are the ones that are causing the crime. Like, the hypocrisy is astounding, but also the heartlessness, whether it is in their rhetoric or whether it's in their bills. The fact that they go around and they say that they're Christians, and there is nothing Christian or loving or compassionate or merciful about anything that they do. And so for me, I just want the American people to wake up. If you really, like, I tell people all the time, if you want Jesus, go to church.
So her saying, I just want the American people to wake up. And, the term wake up used to be exclusively for the truth community. And it was back when the truth community was better, right? There was some dopes in there, liberal dopes and right-wing dopes, but the majority of people in the truth community understood the idea of the left-right paradigm. That both parties, both liberal and conservative, both Democrats and Republicans, have to be controlled if you have a shadow government. So the idea is that you're waking up from the idea of the American dream, which is false. Of course, American dream is true in the sense that you can start off as somebody who's poor and become rich economically. And, that's, with the way the economy is going, and with the development of AI technology and all these other things, that's becoming less and less possible. But one of the things that the American system was good at, and I'm not saying this is, it is something, but it's not everything. It's not as important as people think it is. That you could start off as an impoverished person and, come in as an immigrant even and become a millionaire, billionaire, and maybe even a trillionaire, right? So just with hard work and some luck and some, whatever it is. I mean, not even luck, because with hard work, pretty much anybody could become a millionaire. Of course, being a millionaire isn't going to be the same thing when, it isn't the same thing as it used to be, and it won't be anything when people are spending $1 million for a loaf of bread when there's hyperinflation, or whatever it is, right? That's happened in countries where people had to bring wheelbarrows full of their cash, billions of whatever their currency was, to buy things because their currency had been hyperinflated, right? But aside from that, that's a real thing. Master Chargy, the third master of the Sizemore system, used to come to America, and he was always a very observant person. And he said, this is a wonderful system because it rewards for merit. And he was speaking from a country that has a caste system coming from India. And all these systems around the world, there's so much more nepotism, there's so much more discrimination that, people can come here and no matter how much prejudice there is and how much, whatever issues they had in their own country, and rise up economically. But that doesn't mean the system's fair other than that, or it's, even that it's not fair. There's still nepotism, and there's still, it's better to be born into a club, and it's better to be born into a certain racial demographic or whatever, or culture. When you're talking about waking up, the idea is that there is a shadow or hidden government that controls politics and controls a system of illusion, an illusionary system, where you have to wake up from your being indoctrinated into the system, like a cult or something like this, where there's an indoctrination process that happens through the TV and the media and your school system and your church and your social system and your parents and your neighbors, where they are selling you something that isn't real and isn't good for you. And to understand that, to wake up from that and realize that there is not just a shadow government, but there is controlling aspects where they use advertising on children. That you have these senses, you have the five senses, and you have a sexual drive, and you have your proclivities as a human being, your urges, and your desire for fat and sugar. Like people have these crave foods, these binge foods, and how they use sex and pornography, and they use all these other types of things to lure you away from your divinity within you and your true path towards whatever your spiritual path is. And so, and gets you to buy into the addictions, right? And to buy into the manipulated dreams and so forth. But if you are trying to say to people that wake up from the Democrats or wake up from the Republicans, but we're great, like if you're a Democrat and you're saying that the Republicans are all asleep, or you're a Republican saying that the Democrats are all asleep, it goes against this inherent policy, this inherent truth, not policy, but truth, that to create something of this magnitude, to indoctrinate 340 million people in a global situation, 7 billion people, you need everybody on board, almost 8 billion people. You need you need all the powers that be controlled. Everything has to be controlled. And so if the Democrats and the Republicans are not both controlled, then you don't have a handle on that system, right? Like if you said to somebody, I have a deal for you, you can buy this, this political party, and it will do whatever you want it to do half the time, but the other half of the time it'll do the opposite of what you want it to do. So every 4 years you'll do great for 4 years in business or whatever it is, but as soon as the power changes, you'll do poorly. That's not a controlled system, right? If you only have half a control of something, I mean, people who are in business want 51%, right? If you have half control, that means somebody else has say in it, right? And so within this controlled system, there are battles. The battles between the so-called elite, what I call the controllers. And there's battles between the Democrats and the Republicans for power, in the sense that they both know that it's a binary system and they both got to take turns. And when they're not in power, they're also in power because they still have a minority share of the power. And they also are, pushing their agenda and waiting for the next time, waiting for the current system, the current party to fail so that they can gain power again. Like the Democrats are biding their time for Trump to, fuck up the world the way he's doing in the country. And then they're going to grab a hold of that and then take it in that direction. But they're both on the same team. They're both controlled by the same people. There's people overseeing, the same people are overseeing both sides. And that's a fundamental knowledge. It's a fundamental thing to know, knowledge base, if you're going to use the term wake up. Because if you don't wake up to that, if you don't understand it's controlled and there's no political solution, because if there's a political solution, it's not controlled. If you could vote yourself awake, if you could vote yourself to get out of the situation the way it is, then there wouldn't be, you would not be asleep, right? You would be able to do it within the system. That the system itself, there isn't anything within the system allowing you to change the system, right? That the system is locked down. The very essence of this is there's no chance of a third party doing anything in America because the binary system has control over everything. And as Donald Trump said when he interviewed with Joe Rogan, when he found out his first term, because Donald Trump wasn't really a Republican when he got elected, and he didn't have Republican allies, and so he couldn't do anything. And he said that if you run as an independent like RFK Jr., that you had no chance of doing anything because you still have to get the Senate and the House and the other branches of the government to vote with you on your bills and work with you, and they simply won't, right? They're just going to, do nothing until you get disempowered and you're voted out. And so, even if you had, some sort of presidential coup and a real person got in there who was, somehow kissed the ring of one group of people, as soon as they went rogue, they would handle the person, right? Their own party would turn on them and everybody else. So there is no way within the system to wake people up and change things for awoken people. If you're an awake person, then you realize voting is useless. And it's like one of the fundamental principles of claiming that you are no longer in a stupor. Because indoctrination means waking up to the whole system of indoctrination. And that both sides are a part of it. Like just, everything else is a part of it, right? But more importantly, that change is necessary. Change is happening all the time, but not the kind of change we need. It's a total change in orientation to our existence. And in this system, if you're not driven by the material system 100% of the time, if you're not consuming 100% of the time, every individual, then the economy can't keep on going the way it's going, right? It needs hyper consumerism because it's a consumer-based system, and it also has to. You also have to buy into the illusion that money, which is actually a debt, it's an IOU, has value. When we're playing a monopoly game with monopoly money, and we're all agreeing something that's doesn't have any value does have value, and so that's if you wake up to that and you realize money is just worthless, it's only because we give it money, that we give it a value, that everything's based in perception. So if you wake up from the perception that money has value and everybody does that, the system collapses. If everybody stops being hyper materialistic, then the debt and the debt ratio to the amount of money that we have, which is already, again, if you wake up to the national debt or the derivatives market or the multiple aspects of debt that I cover so much on this channel, the $100 billion, $100 trillion that people are in debt, the 37 or 40, 38, whatever it is now, trillions of dollars in national debt, the unpaid liabilities of 25 to 30 billion in Social Security and another 35 billion in Medicaid, Medicare, and these other things that aren't even funded, and then the bullshit wars and military-industrial complex and all the lies behind that, right? And so if you wake up to all the lies, you realize the system is all fucked on every level. And so how do you change that? How do you acknowledge that? Well, the system has to collapse and you have to start something over that's based in, reality, not some illusionary aspect where we all believe a bunch of bullshit that isn't true. And as soon as we stop believing in it, what happens? The system collapses because it's based in an illusion. So it's funny how all these people, the right-wing QBs and the right-wing Trumpers and the liberal woke people are all saying, wake up. When, by very definition, if you're a part of the political system, you're not only asleep, but you're also convincing other people to stay asleep. It's part of your job. You're a gatekeeper. So anyways, I just thought I would add that. There's one other thing I want to get to here. The second thing I want to cover is there was this mayor named Tom Ford who they did a Netflix documentary on. And they open it up with him coming out, and he's, an obese-looking Tom Farley. I guess Chris Farley. He looks like Chris. I think Chris Farley might have played the guy in Saturday Night Live. I barely remember this happening. But he comes out saying, in a disheveled, red-faced, sweaty, obese Canadian addict, and he comes out and says, I do not smoke crack, and I'm not addicted to crack. And he just comes out and says this. He walks up to the media, and he says other, hilarious stuff, right? Like he says, there's a woman who is accusing him of sexual abuse, and he says her name, and I don't know who this person is, and she says that I want to eat her pussy, and I don't need to do that because I have plenty to eat at home. I'm happily married. These were two of the things they show right in the beginning of the documentary. And it's very comical. And the other thing is this guy, this sub, which was called Ocean Gate. And this guy was building a submarine. And again, I missed this story. I cover the news quite a bit. And I missed this story. But this guy was building a submarine, and he thought he was smarter than he was. I'm trying to look for this guy's name here. Stockton Rush. And he eventually took a flawed submarine after he had been warned over and over again. He fired everybody on his staff that gave him warnings that this submarine was unsafe. His idea was to take people down to the Titanic in portable submarines that were lighter and easier to manage. They were even easier to ship around the world and to bring out. They have to carry these things in boats and things. And titanium-hulled ships that have the capacity to withstand that kind of pressure from the depth of 4,000 feet where the Titanic is were just too heavy. So he came up with this idea to use carbon fiber, which is very strong. But the fiber, when it got to a certain level of pressure, below 3,000 feet, would start popping, the individual fibers, and it would weaken the integrity. I'm very fascinated with load-bearing walls and things in architecture and how much weight things can withstand. And, they have this now with pressure, obviously, and something different with the ocean because it's pressure all around the vessel, right? So they have to have something that can withstand that kind of pressure. And he had this idea to put carbon fiber into these subs, which was much lighter, and it made it like he could do a business now. And it kept on failing. And all the people around him, all these experts, kept on saying it's not going to work. We have to not bring it down to these depths. But unfortunately, the Titanic is at 4,000 feet. And he eventually brought this thing down to the Titanic with a couple of billion in heirs in there, and himself, and the thing imploded, and it was a big, story. But the way that he fired everybody, and once he fired this one guy who was this person who was an excellent pilot, who was piloting the subs, and the guy, the Stockton Rush wanted to pilot the sub himself, and wanted the pilot to stay aboard the ship. They were doing a test under another shipwreck. And the guy, argued with him and said, at least let me come on board with you. And Stockton Rush piloted the ship right below the shipwreck in a way that it was in a very precarious position. You know, they're using a remote controller from a video game to pilot the ship, right? And so the other guy gets it out, and Stockton Rush said, I owe you one, but then starts to exclude the guy from the company because, you know, he feels like the guy showed him up, but the guy basically saved him and his business. If the guy wasn't down there, he would have fucked the sub up and, you know, everyone would have died, right? So it was a thing, but this guy was excluded, and he kept on giving these warnings, and finally he wrote something up, and Stockton Rush fired him. You know, and the other thing is that the submarine wasn't they wouldn't allow a third party to certify it. And, you know, he had all these issues. So he fires the guy, and then he goes to the chief engineer. He goes, I don't mind spending $50,000 to ruin somebody's life, right? And then told the engineer that him and his team couldn't ever confront this guy. So he was very much like a Trump, this guy who did the sub. And the other guy who did the Tom Ford, he was also very much like a Trump. Like all the things that he did were very similar, firing people that disagreed with him, you know, having people cover up for him. He's just a more dopey version of Trump, to the point where he had Hulk Hogan come out in the WWE bullshit. You know, he met Trump, and you see they show a picture of him shaking Trump's hand, and he had Hulk Hogan come to one of his events or, you know, be a part of his political shit that he was doing in Toronto. This crack-addicted mayor. And they both had similar leadership styles of Donald Trump. And so the mayor of Toronto was eventually ousted because of his fucking crack addiction and his obnoxious behavior. And he tried to make a comeback. He went to rehab, and then he got cancer and died, where the other guy imploded in this ship. And so you have these Trump-like personalities. You know, people who don't listen to feedback, they're myopic in their view, and they just go headlong into something, forcing their way. I mean, force being the operative word. And it's, you know, eerie that, of course, I'm sure that they edited these stories to make them Trump-like. In fact, they showed the picture with Tom Ford and Trump early on in that documentary. But the other, you know, the Ocean Gate, and then the name of his company was Ocean Gate. He literally named a company in which it was going to have a tragic end, Ocean Gate. You know, Gate being Watergate and Ketchup Gate and any number of these gates that they have. Ketchup Gate, of course, Trump's WWE fake assassination attempt thing. But anyways, you know, I thought these things were both very interesting because, you know, there's a certain personality that leads, a certain leadership style that, you know, the narcissism and the inability to understand when you're failing, you have to listen to people and have to be humbled. Like a good leader needs to be humbled and reminded that they don't know everything, and you know, some of whatever you want to call it, God, and certainly God and divinity, but also like luck and destiny and things have to play a role in these things where it's out of your hands. And you have to be able to do the work, but you can't force things that aren't supposed to happen. And, you know, ignore the warnings that are there for you. We all have warnings in our life. We all are told to turn around or to reconsider or to, you know, be more clear on what we're doing and reevaluate things. We always have to reevaluate things. And when you have people, and more of them, who are able to force their way, and there's nothing stopping them from working around the system. The guy who ran the Ocean Gate thing, he found a way to manipulate the system because he claimed that the passengers who were paying him money to be aboard the ship were somehow a part of the project, that they weren't customers. And if they were customers, he needed a third party to sign off on the submarine. Plus, the boat that carried the submarine was out of Canada, and the submarine was built in America, so it was unclear who had jurisdiction. So he was manipulating the system to not have a third party check it to make sure that it was safe, because he knew it wasn't safe. And he was taking it down there, and he was himself going in with it You know, he was like captain of his own fucking catastrophe. And if you watch the documentaries, you can't help to see that they both have a little Trump in them, right? And the things that ended with these guys dying tragically, and you have Trump, leading the path to the same thing. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.